Hey guys, let's just get started. I think we have enough people. Again, thank you for joining the session. My name is Prince Huang. I've been at TechExcel for quite a long time, so I'm the Director of Product Management here. And so today, I just wanted to show you guys a quick overview of DevSuite before we do any in-depth training. The goal of this training course would just be for admins, new admins or even experienced admins alike, to learn some of our features, how we can implement those features that I'm going to show today. So again, this is just going to be a quick overview on DevSuite, but we're planning to do one of these sessions each month, at least for the DevSuite product line. And we're going to do it for customer-wise as well as service-wise too. So stay tuned for that. We'll send out notices to you, to everybody. Okay, so again, we're covering the DevSuite overview. So I just wanted to show you guys some of the best practices and what DevSuite is. I think a lot of our customers use DevSuite, but are not quite sure what its intention is for. So a lot of people use it for maybe just simple issue tracking, but there's a lot more to that. So hopefully, in this session, I can bring out those features and kind of show you what DevSuite is all about. So before I begin, I just want to point you guys to this tree here. So the way I have set up is I have my requirements up on the top, and then down below I have my developments. So you can kind of see there's a little hierarchy there. So I have my requirements, and I have my development, which is the kind of a children or children project, if you will, of the requirements. So what that means is any requirements that I decide to implement will be done inside development, and those same requirements can also be tested as well. So DevSuite is an ALM solution, and its goal, its purpose is to ensure traceability from requirements to development to testing. So that's what DevSuite is in a nutshell. So I'm going to start in the requirements piece. Some of you guys may not have, the requirements module, or you may just have the test cases, but this is going to be an overview on how all of these things are actually linked together to provide you that traceability. So starting in the requirements, I think the very first thing I want to mention to you guys would be this tree here. So this tree has changed over the years. So right now at the root level, what I always recommend would be to go ahead and place your products or your projects at the root level. So I have my content sharing manager as one of the products. Then just as an example, I have another product or a project down below. So you can create as many of these to represent either products that you're building or projects you're implementing. Traditionally in the past, we didn't have this tree. So what we would have done was to create, maybe, product ABC requirements, and then maybe another requirement for, product XYZ. So it would have been done at this level. And the problem with that would be each one of these guys, if you guys are aware, has its own workflow. So that means, if I wanted to change the workflow for one of the products, I would actually have to do it twice if I had multiple products at this level. So having said that, I'm going to bring you into what I'm talking about. So this is the admin tool right here. Some of you guys may have it installed, but it's a Windows client that gets installed. I'm actually on the server right now, but you can place it anywhere. It uses a web service to connect, so you could be at any location from anywhere to connect directly into your system. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that same structure. So my requirements, and then the children development task, and then also the test cases. So if I come into any of these, this allows me to configure, the workflow, right? So this is my requirements workflow. It's a generic out-of-the-box workflow. You guys may have the same or a little bit different, but generally, all requirements traverse through this workflow. So in my workflow, it's all new requirements go to review. Then we get some kind of approval. We could potentially drop it or put it on hold. And then, we design for it and then finally send it over to development, testing, completed. So this is kind of our traditional waterfall workflow. But later on, throughout the session, I'm going to show you how we can actually incorporate Agile within this as well. Okay, so back to what I was saying is, if we had the old structure where we had, product ABC requirements and product XYZ requirements. If I wanted to change this workflow, for example, if I want to get rid of, on hold, then I would have had to do it twice, right, for each product. So nowadays, the way we would maintain that easier for the admins would be to just implement the products or the projects at this root level. Okay, so that's the number one tip. Down below, I actually organized my requirements and my specifications into modules or components. So we have our content sharing manager. Down below would be all the components that describe that particular product. And what these folders really are is just a filter, a way to organize your requirements and your specifications on the right-hand side. So if I click on architecture, then I'm going to get all of my requirements and specifications that are for that particular product, for that component of that product. Okay, so it's just a filter that allows you to kind of organize things. So what is the difference between a requirement and a specification? So generally, the way I like to describe what a requirement is would be things that come in either internally or externally. It could be from your customers, it could be internal product management needs, things like that. But it's very high level. So a lot of times it's generic. It could be something like somebody asking for improve the speed of this application. Well, how do you go about doing that? So in essence, we want to capture that requirement where they're asking for improvement in performance, but then we want to create these children's specifications to describe what developers need to do in order to accomplish that. So in other words, what I'm doing is I'm breaking down our high-level requirements into as many children's specifications as needed to fulfill that requirement. And these guys actually serve as the blueprint for development. And you'll see, in a couple of minutes here that I'm going to assign this over to development. And I'm also going to use these for our test cases as well. Okay, so that's essentially what we're doing in here. Now, you can have unlimited levels. So this is just one layer where a high-level requirement breaks down to multiple children's specs. But then you can actually, create maybe grandchildren's specs underneath that. So there's a lot of linking that you can do. And we have a relationship tree view that will outline that entire structure. So that way you can kind of see if you change one spec, how would it impact another spec? Okay, so that's the difference between these two views. Finally, well, let me just show you guys how to do this real quick. So essentially what I'm going to do is, and by the way, everything that you see in here can be renamed. So right now I have my requirements called as epics. I should have cleaned my system a little bit better and rename that to requirements. But essentially I would do a new requirement here. And on this page, and similarly with all of the modules that you're going to see later, you can totally customize this page, but it's going to follow that workflow that we set up in the admin. So here I'm just going to, call it a high-level requirement, and then I'm just going to give it a very generic name, right? So I'll just put generic right here. And then I'm going to, input the owner, and the owner really is the author, the guy who's responsible for maintaining this requirement, and I'm just going to put my sample user there. And I'm just going to copy and paste. So here, there's some best practices. Oh, my browser has some security issues. Okay, so I'm just going to say high-level requirement. And spell that. But here, what we could have done is a couple of things. So, I didn't include this, but I could have included instructions for testing as well, because the guy who's writing this probably will know how to test as well, right? So I could have put testing instructions here, etc. Within my description, or actually even created another field for my testing instructions. Okay, so because the requirements are going to link to your test cases, this could be either done by the person who's creating the specs, or it could be the person or the actual, QA lead or QA manager to manually update these. But anyway, so I'm going to first create my generic requirement, and notice that it has no parent there, only because this is the high-level requirement that comes in, right? So I'm going to go ahead and submit. Now, a lot of people ask us, what is the difference between submit and new and submit? So submit basically will just submit this requirement and close the dialog. Submit a new actually will close this dialog, but bring this page up again for you to create another requirement. So that's very similar in all of the different modules. Whether you're in requirements, development, test library, you will oftentimes see that button. Okay, so that's just wanted to clarify that real quickly. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and submit that, and it closes the dialog. So here I have my high-level requirement. It could be that example I gave you where we're saying improve the performance and whatnot. And the next thing I want to do is just right-click and say new as child. And you can kind of see, because I clicked on that high-level requirement, my parent field is automatically filled out. Okay, so here I'm just going to say smaller, text spec. Okay, so this is actually, as I mentioned before, where we would actually give some instructions on how we're going to implement this. Okay, so we want to make this as specific as possible, hence the word specification. We want to use these as blueprints for development. And so, we're going to go ahead and submit this, and the type is already chosen as a spec, so we're good there. Submit. I should have really clicked on submit new because I want to do another one, but I'm going to do it again. So now I'm going to say, smaller 2. Okay, and I apologize if I typed it out, unfortunately. That's something new with the browsers. Huh? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and submit. All right, so now I have this, and all I have to do right now is just do a quick refresh, and we'll see that hierarchy. Okay, so now I have my high-level requirement generic, and again, I could have done as many layers as I need to capture this requirement. All right, so it's as easy, as simple as that. I think that's all I'm going to cover for requirements today. There's one more thing I just want to point out to you guys. For our requirements, there's a lot of people don't know this, but there's a couple of additional features or views that you can enable. One of them being the baseline view. And what this does is it actually takes a snapshot of everything that you have currently in terms of the specs or the requirements that you built out. It takes a snapshot of that. And as you're changing this, you can actually create another baseline or another snapshot, and then you can compare the two, right? So what's very useful about this is, let's just say we have, a couple of new requirements that changed, and we want to, let our QA team be aware of those changes. Well, all I have to do is use the baseline view to compare the difference, and it'll retrieve whatever, addition or add or changes that we made, and you can just print that over and send it over to QA so they know what to test, right? All the new things that need to be tested. So I find that to be a very useful feature that a lot of our customers currently are not using or implementing. Okay, so I just want you to be aware. It's the baseline view, and in the admin we can easily enable that. I think under optional features right here. Okay, so we can do baseline view, and there's change management and other things, but we'll cover that in future sessions. I want to keep this short, but I just wanted you to be aware that's something that I find very useful. Okay, so we're going to hop on over to development now. And so again, to get to development, I'm going to just go over to our development issues and tasks. So before I do anything, again, I want to point your attention over to the left-hand side. All right, so I'm going to switch that view real quick. On the left-hand side, it's essentially going to be the same folder structure that you had in requirements, right? Because we're building these 2 products or projects, right? But this time, we're not going to be breaking them down by components. That was only, for requirements to organize that. But for development, it's a little bit different. We want to capture our releases, right? And we want to capture, and, if we want to implement sprints, we can go ahead and do so. So this is the portion where we can actually implement a little bit agile mixed with that waterfall requirement, right? So how that looks like is the requirement will actually be sitting in development, but inside development, we can choose to do agile or not, right? So this requirement, if we assign that requirement over to development, then we start following this particular process. Right, so we have our different releases, and then underneath optional, this is all optional, we can enable the sprints. Okay, so now for this example, the products or projects, I actually don't have our sprints enabled. Okay, so all I wanted to show you guys was that if you do enable sprints, versus if you don't, you can pretty much do the same thing, but you're going to be missing a couple of critical features, which I think are extremely useful if you're agile or if you aren't. Okay, so anyway, down below on the sprint, what we're going to see are the features or the requirements that we decided to assign out to either that sprint or that release. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you use sprints. Sprints are just time-boxed iterations, right? So you can have as many sprints as you need to in order to complete that release, right? Versus if you're more traditional and you know you're developing a new release every 6 months, you're planning for 6 months of work here. So all of these guys hopefully will be completed, within that 6 months. Versus in Agile, you're not going to have as many of these features or stories or specs. It's going to be much less because of the 2-week duration maybe, right? So this can actually be 2 weeks. It can be 4 weeks. You can set that within DevSuite. By default, I have it set at 2 weeks. So what exactly am I going to get with sprints? So one of the things that you just saw actually was the storyboard, okay? So the storyboard allows us to see the statuses, right, by column, right? So it's your traditional, task board or storyboard, okay? The way I have it configured is that all of my specs appear on the left-hand side, and all of my tasks that I need to do for that particular spec appears, within the status columns. So in other words, if I show you this view right here, and I come into the list view, what I have here is for this particular specification, these are the following tasks that must be completed in order to complete that particular spec. Okay, so when I flip over to the board view, I'm just, transforming this view into something visual so that you can see by cards this relationship. So if I flip over to the board view, I'm going to have, tech spec 1, wherever that is, right here, and then the children tasks, all those tasks that need to be done, those could be, of course, owned by different people, right? And what their statuses are in a presentational view. So this is a visual indicator. So having said that, this board view is only available for sprints and not for, milestones. So things at this level, we just can't present that board view. So what I'm trying to say is, even if you're waterfall, even if you do your releases every 6 months, you can still utilize the sprint feature just for that board view. Okay, so you can just make this sprint to be 6 months long, right? It's just, and you can rename it so that it's not even called a sprint. But in order for you to just get that board view out, we would have to use what we call sprints. Okay. So now, how do I plan for a sprint, or how do I plan for a release, right? With my specs in mind. Okay, so I'm going to expand version 2 here, and you can kind of see for current sprint. So I've actually set the start date of this particular sprint to be, this week. So it's going to show you a green icon letting you know that it's currently running, versus a sprint that has a future date. And that would be something that we would start assigning to. Okay, so you don't want to interrupt current sprints because everything underneath are things that you committed that you must deliver by the end of the sprint, and you don't want anything to be delayed. So when you're doing your planning, you always want to make sure you do it inside the next sprint that hasn't started yet. But before we do so, I'm going to take you back to requirements real quickly, and we're going to look at our specs, right? So what I'm going to do here is we're going to have 2 options to bring this into development. We have assign to development, or we assign to backlog. I'm going to go ahead and do this one first. Okay, so oops, I think I misclicked something. There we go. Assign to backlog. Okay, and you can kind of see, so my backlog looks identical again to that root folder structure that I had on the left-hand side, right? So these are going to be my specs for this particular product. So I'm going to hit OK there, Content Sharing Manager. And I've enabled actually the product backlog. So this is an optional feature too. You can choose to use this or not. But basically, this is a place that allows me to prioritize everything. Okay, so over here, you can kind of see what I just brought over. My smaller text specs, smaller tasks, like 1, 2, 3, and 2 right here, right? So I apologize for my naming. It's kind of weird there, but what you can do essentially here is you can actually right-click and say prioritize items, right? So I'm going to minimize. I don't want to see any of those tasks right now. I just want to prioritize my list of specs. Okay, so essentially this is kind of a agile way here. So I can kind of say Ajax extension support. This particular feature I think is very important to my organization and something I want to get done quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that up to the top. So by dragging and dropping to the top, I'm essentially prioritizing this to be at the very top priority. Okay, so you can kind of move things around, and then once you're done, you submit, and this list should reflect that. Okay, so essentially to now plan for a sprint, we're going to go ahead and go to sprint 4. There should be a couple items I did earlier. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be peeling off the top. Okay, so this is not an infinite time frame, right? So I can't just go and assign everything, but I basically want to pick up the highest priority items, right? Which I should have done when I was doing that prioritization. So I'm going to peel off the top until this guy becomes full. So how do I know when a sprint is full? Well, for every one of these specs, you can actually associate points with it. So what these points are a measurement of the complexity between these specs. So let's just say if spec 2 was, more complex, and it's going to be, it's going to take a little bit longer to do, then it should actually have, higher spec points than, let's just say, smaller tech spec 1, 2, 3. So assuming I give this 10 points, give this 5 points, and I've dragged both of them inside the sprint, essentially that sprint now has 15 points worth of specs. Okay. Now, as you're maturing in this process, as you're, completing these sprints, you will eventually know how many points you can do within a sprint. So just think of it as a water bucket and how much water it can fill. Okay. So eventually you will find out, oh, maybe I can do within 2 weeks 50, points worth of specs. Okay. And then so the next time you're planning for a new sprint, you can only do about 50. When it's all accumulated. All right, so anyway, enough about that. I'm just going to go ahead and drag and drop right into that sprint. Okay. Oh, it looks like these are closed or something. Okay, anyways, there. Okay, so now I basically planned these 4 features, these 4 specs for this particular sprint. Okay, so now the next thing I will want to do is there might not be any tasks. So I guess when I was doing this earlier, I created a task. But the best practice would be to actually prioritize those features. Don't worry about any of the tasks just yet. But go ahead and just figure out what you want to do within that sprint. And then the next step after that would be then to just go ahead and create the tasks that are needed to accomplish that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, since I already have some tasks, I can still do it anyway. But I'm going to go ahead and right-click. I'm going to do new group task. Okay, looks like I have some issues, right? So let's try that again. So new task. Oh, I see. I think I know what my problem is. Okay, I apologize for that. It looks like I can't create any new. So essentially what I'm going to do is, for every one of these, create the following 4 tasks. Okay, so tech spec, I have my documentation that's needed. This is bad naming right here. It's not really QA verification, but rather, a task for unit testing, perhaps. Maybe I got to do mobile development. Maybe I got to do Windows development in order to complete the spec. Okay. Now, these are all templates. So what that means is, for any one of these, I can keep using my templates to create them. So you can kind of see, for every one of these, I'm going to always have those 4 tasks. Now, had I been able to bring up that page, I would have been able to, pick and choose which tasks I actually want to create. Okay. So now, in a sense, my dev track or my development workflow becomes extremely easy, right? So here, I'm going to go to development, issues, and tasks. I'm going to just quickly show you what my workflow looks like now, right? So it's a task workflow, but I could have enabled, multiple workflows to cover defects too, because so far, all I've been talking about was just tasks and nothing to do with issues or defects. But I can totally create another workflow, use our multiple workflow feature, to have a different workflow for defects or the defect issue type, right? So this is my task workflow, and by having something very similar like this, my board view looks very clean, right? And it's not only for, visual purposes and whatnot, but this actually, because you're creating tasks, you're always having the same owner for each of these issues. So no longer are you changing owners for issues. You can always see, what a person has done. Whereas if you create a gigantic workflow and you're forwarding it off to different owners, then you lose, basically you'll lose some information where like what his actual work, like what he has really done so far, right? So what I mean by that is if I did everything by task and I group by the owner, you will be able to see their workload, right? So if we're changing the owner always, then their workload is always going to fluctuate, right? So we don't want that. So hence I'm creating basically tasks. And this workload essentially is just the schedule. So you can define a schedule for each individual. You can say that they're working 8 hours per day and for 2 weeks, right? Then that will be their capacity. So as you're assigning tasks to them, this workload goes up. This percentage finish also goes up as they're completing these tasks. Now, speaking of that, one of the things that you probably notice is this little percentage finish sign right here, right? So this is extremely useful as a visual indicator to see where things are at. So not only do we have statuses, but we have percentages. Okay, now these percentages actually will roll up to our requirements, right? So right here, as I'm completing those tasks, eventually this particular spec is going to increase in percentage. So everything that you're seeing in the system actually rolls up, okay? So you can actually see the percentage finish for the sprint and also for the milestone as well, okay, by completing these tasks. And how you would do that is you would just go into the task, and we actually use time spent fields and the time remaining fields to capture that. So what I'm going to do real quickly here is say that, there's 2 hours remaining that we need to do, and I've already spent 2 hours. So essentially what this is going to do is change that task to be assigned. Okay, so it's completing about something, and change the workflow there. I have like some restrictions here. Okay. So anyway, by essentially changing those time fields, 2 hours left, right? Remaining 2 hours spent, that percentage is going to increase to 50%. And that's also going to roll up. It's not going to show 50 here because there's, 4 tasks there, right? So it's only for one of the tasks. So it might actually, if I did the math correctly, I'm not even going to try, but that percentage is going to go up a little bit there. Okay. All right. So that's enough about development. I'm going to move on to the test library real quickly here. In the test library, again, I have the same structure. So it's going to be, exactly like my requirements tree, actually. So I have my 2 products there, then I have my modules, right? And so here it's really straightforward. It's almost like a replica of your requirements, if not identical, okay? So the very first thing you want to do here is you want to actually bring those specs over from the requirements view, right? So there's an option here where it says new template. So anywhere where you see template, the word template, that actually just means test case, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And essentially what I'm going to do now is this is going to go look inside my requirements tree right here. And we're just going to go ahead and pick our specs, right? So pick our specs, and I click on this link, and it's going to create 2 new test cases based off of those specs. Okay, so essentially I think I should see those down below right here. So smaller test spec 2, smaller test spec 1, 2, 3. Okay, so inside a template or inside a test case, it's very important that I set the right statuses. These could be customized as well, but I want to make sure I hit approve so I could use them for actual testing. If they were in draft form, I wouldn't be able to use this test case at all. The template owner is not the actual tester. It's going to be the person who's responsible for maintaining these test cases. And here I'm just going to put in my procedure, whatever. So some of the fields actually got copied over, but I could potentially change those. And I'm going to do a very simple test case right here where I say, actually, I'm going to go ahead and say, and close that real quick. So if I edit this, can I edit this out? Oh, in draft, I can only do it in draft one. Yeah. Okay, so here I'm going to say, this is my test procedure. Follow the steps. Okay, something like that. And then my expected result is going to be very, very basic. I'm going to use no verification point, so it's just going to be a text field. This is what I expect. Okay, so this is going to be one of my test cases. And it's very, very generic, right? So I have my test procedure up on the top, my expected result, simple text field. This is what I should expect. So I'm going to go ahead and approve that now. And earlier, I couldn't edit this because in the approval state, I made some of these fields read only. So I'm going to go ahead and submit that. And then now I'm going to go into smaller text spec 2, but I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to utilize our verification point feature. So now when I do something like this, again, I'm going to choose the owner here real quickly. The test procedure here is no longer going to be a procedure. So I can rename this field to just the description of this test case. I want to capture my test procedure here, actually. So I'm going to use this option, fix verification point, right? So I'm going to say, step 1, right? Step 1, do this, okay? Oops. And then what is the result for doing that? I'm going to say, oh, he jumped, something like that. And then I'm going to add another step. So I can add as many steps now. And this actually probably will, represent most of your test cases more than the other one that I created in a D5. So now, when we're actually testing this, we actually have to verify each one of these steps instead of, verifying the entire test case. So we're verifying any one of these steps. So I'm going to hit OK. And then finally, I'm going to move this over to approved. Okay. All right. So that's really it for a test case. We do have the environment variables. So I'm going to show you that real quickly. Under the environment variables, you're defining the configurations that can be used, that this test case can be used in. So if I want to say, that this test case is applicable for all these different platforms, for all these different browsers, I can say so. And I'm never going to use this test case whenever I'm testing against game consoles. Okay, so that's what I'm saying here. So it's applicable for these, following configurations or environments. If you are using Excel, each one of these, this test case will actually represent multiple records or rows in Excel for each one of these environments, right? So inside DevSuite, whenever you modify a test case, it's actually going to be applicable for each of these environments. So I'm going to go ahead and submit that. And now I'm going to bring you over to the next step right here, the test run base, which is the execution of these tests. Okay, so again, I have my same folder structure. So I have like a consistency going on here. So I have my different products. I have my products up here at the root. But again, this now looks a little bit different, kind of like, our development, because now we're testing against releases and against test cycles. So I'm going to run through this real quickly. I'm going to do a new release. This release basically is defining the scope of testing. So I'm going to say release 4.0, okay? And then all the defects that I capture or I find, I want to go ahead and submit into my development module. So that's essentially what I'm doing right now, defining where defects are going to go to. So I'm going to hit next. I'm going to define who all my testers are going to be. So here, I don't know who my testers are going to be, but I think everybody in my QA team will be a tester. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next here. And this is where I can say, which environments I actually want to test against. So I can say, I want to test, all platforms by the end of this release. I want to make sure I test all browsers by the end of this release. Okay, but I don't really want to test anything game console. So I'm going to ignore that for now. Okay, so then now I'm going to hit next, and this is going to be a combination of those environments that I have selected. Over on the right-hand side, I'm going to go ahead and pick what I want to test. So I want to test everything within this product. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit next, and I'm going to select that. And I'm basically just, picking up test cases now, right? Okay, so I'm gonna hit next, and then I'm gonna hit finish. So this is kind of a wizard-driven thing. It'll guide you through the entire process. At the end, there's nothing for testing just yet because I now will have to create a test cycle. There's actually a shortcut around this. You don't have to actually define a scope like I did. You can just, do this at the cycle level. So I'll explain that in the future. But I'm going to go ahead and create my first test cycle. I'm going to go ahead and hit next. But this time, I'm going to say this is always going to be a subset of what I define at the scope level. So here, I'm going to say, well, only these testers are available for this test cycle, okay? So that's why I only pick those people. And at this moment, I'm going to say, you know what? Only, Mac OS and Windows is ready for testing, but not, any of my mobile stuff. Okay, so I'm only selecting these. Again, this is a subset of what I define at the release level. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. And then here I can also pick, a subset. Let's just say I implemented, architecture features, but not anything else, right? So I can just, pick test cases from within that folder. For simplicity, I'm just going to check off everything, hit next, and then finally, I'm going to hit finish. So at the end of all this, it's going to look like I have, duplicates here, right? So if I just go ahead and sort by the title real quickly, it's going to look like a bunch of duplicates, but they're really not. So auto report generation appears a couple of times, auto routing frame appears a couple of times. But the main difference is that each one of these test cases or testing tasks is going to be for a different environment. Okay, so this one is for testing Chrome on Windows 8. This one's for Firefox. This one's for IE, etc. So I'm going to try to find these guys right here, the ones that I created earlier, right? Smaller text spec 2, smaller text spec 1, 2, 3. Let's go ahead and click into one of these and kind of show you the difference real quickly here. So I don't want to start off with this one. I'm going to come into smaller spec 1, 2, 3. And basically, it's exactly what my test case was defined to be, right? So my test procedure up on the top, expect to result down on the bottom. Super easy. I'm going to go ahead and say, pass or failed at the task state level, right? And I'm going to go ahead and submit that. So an actual tester, this is what they'll be doing, coming into the specs and doing that. And then versus this one right here, the smaller text spec, it's a little bit different because I'm using what we call, verification points. So I can't simply, change the status of the entire testing task. I actually have to go ahead and pass or fail each one of these steps. And you can define rules that define the overall status of this particular testing task. So essentially, if I fail this guy right here, my task state, my entire task state here would actually be set to fail. So you can actually set up rules for that. I'm going to submit that. And essentially, it's going to allow me to create a new defect into development. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just do that real quickly if I can. And, some of the fields are going to be copied over. Yeah, so it looks like, yeah, okay, I should be able to. So basically, the form that comes up for you to submit right into development. Some of the fields are already copied over, as you can see. So we can do some mapping there. And then I'm just going to say defect real quickly. All right, so now where do I place this defect? So inside development, I can actually, put it back into my backlog if I wanted to, right? So, and to be reprioritized with all of the rest of the features as well. So not only in that backlog are you prioritizing just features, but you're also doing defects at the same time if you were doing Agile. So I'm going to go ahead and submit that real quickly. And that's it. So that is in a nutshell what DevSuite is, but I just wanted to show you, lastly, what this all means in terms of traceability. Okay, so now at any given place, whether you are in development, whether you are testing, but more importantly, inside requirements, inside any of these specs, we can always click into it, and you should have this All Links tab available. Okay, so here under All Links, I can see anything that, any other requirement or spec that I was linked to. And then also I'm able to see if there's any development tasks that are sitting in the backlog or anything that's being, currently implemented within any given sprint, any release, right? Or any testing tasks or any test cases, they'll all be listed on this page. So in a way, for testers, you can kind of see, well, has this test case been created for this particular requirement? So you can always see that here. Earlier, I created the test cases from these requirements inside the test library, but I could have done so directly from the requirement too. So as I'm completing these requirements, or as I'm designing these requirements rather, I'm also at the same time creating test cases, okay? And then finally, just to wrap this all up, I'm going to go into the report view real quickly here, and I just want to show you the specification traceability summary report. So this report basically will give me what I just saw, but for every spec in any folder that I choose. Okay, so I did this traceability, on the entire product level, entire content sharing manager level, and you can kind of see up on the top, here's the specifications that are sitting in that product and everything they're linked to in terms of other specifications and development tasks, and then finally QA tests, right? So this traceability report is going to give you that overall view of what's happening across the board for every single requirement. Okay, so that's how it would look like. And you can, of course, customize this to include some fields there, but I, got the most important fields, which are my status fields for everything that's linked. And then finally, this is a forward traceability summary report, but we could have done a very similar report in the test library for a backwards traceability report. Okay, so this is DevSuite in a nutshell. I went over a little bit of time. I apologize for that, but I just wanted to give you guys a quick overview on what DevSuite is before we start diving into the details in our next sessions. Our next sessions will cover things like, well, how do we set up users, right? So there'll be and account types and things like that. How do I create multiple workflows? So those will be in our upcoming sessions, and I hope we'll be able to record 5-minute videos as well for these so that you can find them on YouTube. We're all in the process of doing that today. And thank you guys for coming, and appreciate you guys listening. Let me see if there's any questions. I forgot to mention to you that I think inside GoToWebinar, you have the option to ask questions, and I'm able to see it at the end here, and I can answer anything you have. But it looks like, since I forgot to tell you guys, looks like there aren't any questions. But if you do have any questions, feel free to call our support line number, or you can email support@techexcel.com. Thanks again for coming, and I'll see you next time.